Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions.
That cover's so awesome.
This is Mr. Chris Claremont, a legend.
Melanie goes,
Tired.
How's it going, all you Minties? Uncanny Omar here from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. And join me today for my overview of Brandon Sanderson's White Sand Omnibus from Dynamite. So, stay tuned. Now, before I open this book and take it out of its slipcase, I do want to thank the folks at Dynamite Entertainment for sending us an advance copy of the book. And I don't want to really call it advance because this is the Kickstarter version. The omnibus that is coming out in November will have the exact same content, just the cover will be different. I'll show that here in a little bit. But this is the Kickstarter version, or I'm sorry, maybe it was Indiegogo. It was the crowdfunding version. And it comes in the slipcase. On the slipcase you have the White Sands logo right there. We'll look at that here in a second. But let's take a look at the slipcase. The slipcase is very simply made. There's no patterns. There's not even an ISBN or anything here. And it has this leather finish to it. On the inside, you can tell that, oh, it's got like silver flakes in there. But I can explain that. I'm not sure if it captures on video. I can explain where that came from. All right, so let's talk about the book itself. Now, the book has this canvas texture to it, and it has this silver foil. There we go, so you can get a better look. Pattern right here, that has to be Kenton and his ribbons, or maybe just the Sandmaster and ribbons. Down here, you can see who did the cover art, Dan Dos Santos. On the spine, you see Dynamite logo, Brandon Sanderson, White Sand, a cosmere graphic novel, so it's part of that universe. And then you have Hoskins, Stewart, Gopez, Casas, and Zetro. And then again, the logo of the White Sand. The one thing I noticed is that some of the silver was flaking off as I was reading the book. So I took 3 days. I read a chapter a day, or I guess a book a day. But every time I looked at it after the second day, felt like some of that silver was just flaking off, and I think that's what's in here. Now, this is going to be different when it comes out in the book market and the direct market. On the left-hand side is actually what the cover is going to look like, so it won't have this canvas texture on it. But I just want to clarify, the content will be identical. All the extras, all the pages, and the story, everything will be included that was included in the Kickstarter version. The Kickstarter version just came with a slipcase. I believe it also came with a signed plate. But this is what it looks like. There's no dust jacket. It's just this sign. Now, we are going to crack this book open, show off the artwork, talk a little bit about the plot, and maybe answer some questions that some of y'all may have had about this particular series. So let's go ahead and start that. Okay, let's go ahead and crack it open. End sheets are just this white paper, that's it. There's the logo, Brandon Sanderson's White Sand, a cosmere graphic novel. Fiction by Brandon Sanderson, or Brando Sando as my brother likes to call him. Different novels, part of the Mistborn saga. My gosh, there's a lot. It's just amazing how much one man can write. My buddy Dan was a huge fan of his years ago, and the reason he tried to get me to read a lot of this stuff was because he was pretty much the person that finished Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series. Alright, so this is a story that is based on a novel idea that Brandon Sanderson had. So we'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. Your script is by Rick Hoskins and Isaac Stewart, doing the prologue and the Ars Arcanum. And then the art. So you have Julius Gopez, and you have Julius Ota, Fritz Casas, and all of these different artists doing some of the colors and doing some of the inking. And then you have the main colorist here for the different chapters, like Ross Campbell. And then the lettering by D.C. Hopkins and Marshall Dillon and D.C. Hopkins doing the the first few chapters. let's go ahead and get to that book. So we have the acknowledgments here on the left-hand side. The Ars Arcanum here, prologue, part 1, part 2, and part 3. That's kind of how I read them day by day. This is the table of contents where you're going to find each of these particular stories and chapters. An introduction by Brando Sando and Isaac Stewart doing a forward. And this is where Brandon Sanderson tells about how this was his first story long before he was published professionally. And he kept coming back to the story, not knowing exactly what he wanted to do. And then, unfortunately, as time progressed, this something that just happens with a lot of writers, he kind of put it on the back burner because he was focusing on things like Mistborn. And then the idea kept coming back. Dynamite approached him about having a story that they would love to adapt, and this is exactly what he gave them. And of course, this is all part of the Cosmere universe. Isaac Stewart talks about how they both sat down and wanted to make this a little bigger than what it was. So this was originally published as 3 different graphic novels in trade paperbacks. Here's a glossary, and here's a little bit about the Dayside, kind of a map. But this omnibus actually has a prologue that was added, and I think additional artwork, and then these things here to kind of help you with the magic system, which is freaking awesome, and a little bit of the history behind the different tribes whenever you get to the Dayside, and even the way the political system works, and then, of course, the science behind all of this, which is crazy, because we're about to enter a world called Taldane. Now, some of you all probably been there because I realize that's all part of the Cosmere, so bear with me. For anybody that hasn't read that stuff, we're about to enter this particular planet of Taldane. And Taldane is, as explained here, so this is awesome to have before the story begins, it's kind of a planet that's locked between 2 suns. One side is constantly facing the light side of the sun, and then the other one is constantly in darkness. And there's powerful magic that is used on the day side of things. And not really talked about, at least in here. The night side, or the dark side rather, doesn't have magic, but more guns and things like that is what they're known for. So here we meet our main characters. Well, at least I thought they were the main characters until we were introduced to Kenton. So maybe that's why they added this prologue to kind of put both of these stories a little bit, or tie them a little bit closer, if you will. But this right here, this is Krishala. This is the Duchess of this particular dark side world. And she is going on a journey on this ship as kind of like the last... keeping her dead fiance's dreams alive. It was like one of his last requests before he died, and that was Gavin, and he wrote her a letter that you'll get to see here in a little bit. Now, she's accompanied by a couple of other characters, like Bayon, which feel like this guy and her maybe play a bigger role in the novels. I'm not sure, so if you've read the novels, by all means, let me know. But this is the first time they are coming to the Dayside. This is the first time that this group of people are seeing sunlight, and it's really cool to experience that through them. You know, they have to have sunglasses on because they can't see, and together they're going to try to find these magic users known as the Sand Masters, because they need the help of the Sand Masters to kind of help them with their kingdom. Here's a little bit of the background as to why she's going on this journey, and it is that letter written by Prince Gevelden? Maybe I thought it was Gavin for some reason. But he is referring to her as the Duchess Krishala. Or as everybody likes to call her in this book, Chris. Alright, and then we meet the characters in the Dayside. And keep this in mind 10 days later, because that will come to play later on, just how fast time jumps in this particular story. We get to meet this character of Kenton, and he is there with a bunch of his, I don't want to call them colleagues because some of them don't really get along. He's got a friend or two there, but these are part of the DM, they're all these sand masters. They can manipulate sand and use it as magic. He is not as profound or as skilled as the rest of the sand masters, and he wants to earn a higher ranking position in the guild. And the guild is all, of course, ran by his dad. So his dad is both ashamed and does not want him to take any of the Mastral's paths. That's what he's known as, the Mastral. So through this prologue, you get to find out what kind of character he is, what kind of person he is, his personality, his perseverance, about not giving up, about still wanting to take the path. So it's this test that will make him a Mastral and put him in a higher ranking position, if you will. Now, the prologue quickly introduces you to those characters, and you see finally Chris and her group of people come into the day side and trying to make deals. And then we get part 1. So I can see why that was added, and I love all this stuff. This is some of my favorite stuff. I kind of wish that the paper stock was like the thick matte paper that we've seen used, because I feel like it would have benefited because it's printed in this glossy paper. And I'll talk about the build here in a little bit. So I assume this is the way that the first graphic novel started, where you are just meeting a whole lot of characters of the Sandmasters. Here you get to meet his dad and how his dad's like, no, you need power to be a Mastral. And Kenton is like, I'm really good at controlling my power, though I may not be the most powerful one, but I know I can control it. See, everybody uses what he calls ribbons as far as the magic, and he only has 1 ribbon. So that's why I was talking about the covers here. It looks like 3 ribbons here. And he does end up taking a test where he has to retrieve these gems, and he passes the test, and there's big celebration happening afterwards. We get to meet another shady character. Like, this is an important character as part of the DM, if you will, and that's Dryle. There's a lot of characters here. I know there's like a handful of main characters, but there's a lot of characters that you were introduced to at the very beginning. Now, what ends up happening is that during this celebration, the DM is attacked, and they are being slaughtered by these old nemesis of them. The what are these guys called? The Curstians, I think. This group of look like barbarians, savages that are coming and attacking the DM, and all of them with their powers are trying to stop them, all of them with their magic. Now, what's really cool about this, and I'm sure I sound like a broken record if you've read Brandon Sanderson's stories, is the magic system is really cool. It really reminds me of JRPGs that I used to play. So in order for a Sandmaster to use magic to absorb it from the sands, it costs energy, and it kind of dehydrates them, and it can completely dehydrate them, as in the case here, if they use too much magic. And they need time to rest, they need time to get hydrated. So it's not like unlimited magic. There's definitely a price for the magic that's being used. His whole colleagues, all of the Sandmasters, just end up getting destroyed, and he is the last living person out of the Sandmasters, or so he thinks. As you find out later on, maybe he could not be alone. Now, Chris finally crosses paths with him when misunderstandings lead to the death of her guide. Her and her friends are lost, and they end up finding him, and she tells him exactly what she's looking for. She's looking for Sandmasters to take back to the dark side with them because they need help. And during this time, though, Kenton feels like he is losing his power. He's able to do a couple of little magic tricks, and then his magic is just strained. So he thinks he's kind of lost his power through here. And that's pretty much the premise of this, right? It's both his path and Chris's path coming together and trying to figure out how to help each other. You're introduced to a whole lot more characters in the second installment, because like I said, it's broken down into 3 books, so a trilogy, if you will. But the second installment introduces you to the political system. There's a whole lot of mystery here. There's an investigator. I really like that character. And that's the thing about this. I just put it down a couple days ago, and I cannot remember some of these characters' names outside of some of the ones that I've already mentioned. But it's an interesting read. Let me show you the one thing that I think took me by surprise, because I was getting used to Julius Gopez's artwork. I dig it. It's like this old school 90s image, more like honestly, like Tyler Kirkman, those kind of artists, Billy Tan, that's what it reminds me of, that sketchy art style that I loved so much in the early 90s. And I don't mean that as an offensive kind of thing. Like, I dig his style. It's a little hard to follow during action sequences, and it could be due to the color, too, by Ross Campbell, when there's a lot of characters that, especially when you're dealing with the Sandmasters, that all look very similar. But he gets the job done. Sometimes, and he did the first 11 chapters. But when you get to chapter 12, you do have a fill-in artist, and that is Julius Ota, right here. So it's clean, and Chris has more of an anime feel than the style here, which is a lot more detailed. But the person that ends up wrapping up the art is the artist known as Fritz Casas. He's the one that does the third story in here. And it's kind of a mix of both of the Julius's art styles, Gopes and Ota. It's simplistic, but I find this particular art style easier to follow. And in the third book, or the third part of this particular graphic novel, things start coming together. And I actually enjoyed this because this one here had more action than the first two, even though it looks like I was highlighting what the main part of the action. But there's a lot of sitting around and talking about politics, and Kenton wanting to take charge of the Diem even though it doesn't exist anymore, so he has to prove himself, so they kind of make him a temporary master. But I like the third part, and I like how it all comes together. There's a little bit more action in this one with a couple of twists and turns. And I'm curious if some of these characters do show up in other Cosmere stories, because I feel like they're really interesting characters. Like, what was her name? Aya? I think that was her name. But yeah, if you've read any of the Cosmere and have read this, I'm curious if some of the characters jump over there. Because my brother was asking me about a particular character that shows up, like Autonomy, that shows up in the Cosmere, and kind of told him just to go and read it because I didn't want to ruin it for him. Now, this book right here, this particular version retails for $85. Now, the version that comes out in November, that one is $70 retail price and has 496 pages. Let's look at the back matter. So here's the extras. These are the covers to the trade paperbacks. And this is the cover to the Omnibus, this direct market and standard edition cover. And then the white end sheets. So 496 pages. Let's talk about the build. It is glued binding. So it's very similar to what they did with the Boys Omnibus. It is printed in this thick, glossy paper. Like I said, I think matte paper would have worked better. I don't know, just giving it that old school feel, especially when you have paper like that. I think paper stock would have benefited, or the book would have benefited from a different paper stock. Now, I mentioned the Boys Omnibus. Now, this is a standard size hardcover, meaning the dimensions aren't as big as an omnibus edition. So that is something to keep in mind. This is more of the dimensions of a trade paperback or a single issue, is the trim size of the paper. But that's it. That, as they say, is that. If you're interested in purchasing this book or pre-ordering it when it comes out, don't forget to check out our sponsor, cheapgraphicnovels.com, your online home for graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off cover price. They have excellent shipping and prompt and helpful service. Check out their bargain deals for up to 90% off cover price. And don't forget that CGN also takes pre-orders. That way you don't miss out on the hottest releases. And they are currently running a special promotion for you Minties. If you're a first-time customer, after receiving your order confirmation email, reply back to that email and let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way. They will then apply a free shipping promotional credit to your next order in the US. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discount, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more. And that was the content, the page count, and build of this omnibus. Of course, the omnibus, when it comes out in November, will have a different cover, as I've mentioned, so just keep that in mind. But as far as the content, it should be the same. But if you have any more questions, let me know in the comments down below. Let me know what your favorite Brando Sando novel is. I would love to know. I know my brother has several, and he just praises his work. So I'm very curious what everybody else thinks. And if you've checked this out, what you think about this particular story and how it ties in to the bigger cosmere universe. If you have any questions, leave them down below. Smash that like button. Check out our Patreon and Spread Shop. Amazing ways to support the channel if you can do so. Everyone, stay healthy and safe out there. Much love.